What's good? It's Miles from Without Warning. We back with another video. Been a week since we posted, but we getting more consistent with the content, I promise you. Like, comment, subscribe if you're new here. Share with a friend. It goes a super long way. We ran up on 1K subscribers so quickly. 2K on the way. We appreciate all y'all. Let's get right into the video though. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most slept on albums of the last decade in my opinion. I'm sure you saw the title, thumbnail, whatever, but I'm talking about the 2016 Kid Cudi Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying album. This album is 19 songs long, broken into 4 acts like a lot of Kid Cudi albums are, but this one is a very special one and definitely a looked over one in my opinion. I guess we'll go into a little background, some facts for y'all if you didn't know about the album. I think the context of this album is probably some of the most important things about the album, so it actually is like a key note to like note some of the stuff down if it is not known to you and stuff like that before you go into listening to this album. This is stuff you probably really should know. So this album came out in late 2016. Kid Cudi had recently the year before released Speeding Bullet to Heaven, one of his probably worst, more shit on albums if I'm being honest and stuff like that. I'm not saying that led to Cudi's like downfall or like anything mentally, but I'm sure just as a human it doesn't like stick with you too well or anything like that. But regardless, 2016 was a different year than that, and he was going through a lot of stuff mentally, and he was going on with a big addiction that he had going on for years now. In 2016, Kid Cudi did check himself into rehab. He did seek a lot of help with this stuff he had going on. The same year, he was calling out Kanye West on Twitter, I believe. On Facebook, he also like told his fans everything, hey, I'm checking into rehab, blah blah blah. But mentally, it was a crazy year for him. I can't speak for another man or anything, but just from an outsider standpoint, that's really what it looked like. The same year, the same Pablo tours going on, Kanye ended up checking himself into like a mental hospital rehab type of clinic like that after the Kim K robbery and everything like that he had going on. So it was a crazy year for good music. I don't believe Kid Cudi was in good music at the time, but for the two of them it was a crazy year. But that's some good context to go on because you can feel a lot of the emotions and raw energy that could go into an album like this, because in reality the album is kind of looked at as more of like a dark sounding album, when in reality it's more of him actually coming out of that darkness that he had inside of him. He worked super hand in hand with the production on this album with Mike Dean and Plain Pat, two of the most legendary and most iconic duos of all time when they're working with Cudi. Pharrell and Dr. Genius, two amazing producers as well, worked on this album for a couple tracks, but mostly for the most part, I think 16 or 15 of the 19 songs on this album are Mike Dean, Plain Pat, and Kid Cudi all in the production. Kid Cudi with the vocals, mixing and everything done by all of them. Features on this album are incredible. Travis Scott, Pharrell, Andre Benjamin, aka Andre 3000. He was known as Andre Benjamin on this project. I do not know why. Didn't look into that. I'm sure there might be a little bit of reason behind it, but Andre 3000 is on this album twice, I believe, and both Jaden and Willow Smith are both on this album, adding amazing stuff to this album. Everybody knows the Travis Scott feature, Baptized in Fire, the Kid Cudi and Travis Scott song, and I think that's really what people consider this album for the most part. Like, I think the mainstream listeners and everyone else that didn't dig deep into this album consider this the Baptized in the Fire album or the album cover to that, but no one really, I felt, dig deep into this album. There's first off, I love that song. I think that song is beautiful, but there's so many elements that go into making a song like that, and a lot of those same elements are consistent throughout this entire album, and if people really dug deeper into that, they would see why they love that song so much. And in reality, this album is like just as good as that song, and consistently. One thing this album does amazing, and Kid Cudi does this a lot, is this album actually sets a setting as its own separate world in your own type of head when you're listening to it. Makes you have a complete different mind space, much like an Astro World in 2014. I think that does an amazing job of doing the same concept, but that is actually incredibly hard to do, and when I listen to stuff like that, I just don't get that feeling with a lot of albums. The setting that this album sets for me personally is like dark, rainy night, which kind of matches the album cover, but dark, rainy night, like by yourself, alone, a little sad, but it's not really like a bad sad or anything. It's more of like you just healing by yourself, taking the time you need to yourself, and that's what this album really is all about. And like I said, doing that with an album, like giving those vibrations to completely put you in another world, is something almost near impossible to do, and not many artists can do it. The production on this thing is amazing, like the drums and vocal performance on Releaser, all in is just an amazing song. And there's also like consistent strings in the background of a lot of these songs that make it so beautiful. Like a lot of the strings actually start in the beginning of these songs and then end out near the end of the album and like kind of cut out. But there's also times where Kid Cudi is like screeching and obviously doing those Kid Cudi classic hums. But there's also time where he's really using his voice to sound more like, I don't want to say The Weeknd, but he's definitely using a more high pitch than he has before. And to me, that just shows a happier Kid Cudi or a Miss Cudi. Like, I think that's amazing. That's the true art behind this thing. So you can really get his feelings. That's the true art behind my why everybody loves Kid Cudi, or that I personally love Kid Cudi for the most part. Like, just taking that isolated Man on the Moon character and going through real life events and turning him more into a happy state, while also just like obviously saying that he's going through a lot of stuff, but he's trying to fight it just like everybody else out there. It's just something that I will never get over. I'll always listen to this album like it was like the second, third time I listened to it. I think that's another big point that we have to talk about, that this album is probably not something that you're going to like first listen. You definitely have to give it 2-3 listens, and you have to listen with like great headphones too, get all of the sounds in there. I've listened to it in my AirPods, I've listened to it in studio speakers, all that type of stuff. I think it is amazing, and you have to really dig deep into every single sound, every instrument that's being used, because a lot of it's in there for a reason. Mike Dean and Plain Pat did an amazing job, and they know what they're doing. Kid Cudi's idea behind this album was amazing, and there are songs like Dancing for Eternity where you can really see Kid Cudi as a person, not really just the Man on the Moon, and I think it is amazing. He's showing that he's really like starting to accept and really live with and appreciate the little things in life that he never really got to. When he was portraying that fictional character as Man on the Moon, it was always that isolated, down, sad guy. But now that he's finding like new passions in life and slaying the demons that he has before, which is literally the meaning behind the album, which is why I never really understood why this album got such like a dark energy type of vibe. People think it was like an emo rap and indie folk type of album, when in reality a lot of that stuff does have more negative relations, but in reality this is like slaying those negative relations and actually inverse of what that kind of genre is actually supposed to do. The last thing I want to really say about this album is, as a Kid Cudi lover, I just think it's so dope to see that Man on the Moon guy just get better, move forward in life, make sure he's like moving forward. And even though he's a fictional character, I think a lot of people relate Kid Cudi with that Man on the Moon, and it's one of the greatest concepts of like music, and at least in the past when I was growing up, the Man on the Moon, just fictional character, idea, realization. Same thing with like Astro World. I think those two are like kind of similar like concepts on how great they are, and shows like the greatness and how awesome like you can really visualize and go deep into music ideas. I think that stuff is amazing. If you've never listened to this album top to bottom, I would highly recommend it. Like I said, it's not just a skim. This is like a 2 to 3 listen type of thing, and you got to get your mindset and the context behind this thing. That's why I gave the context in the beginning, because it's really hard to go back on albums and put yourself in the same mindset as it was when it was like a 2016 thing, when it's 5 years later in 2021. You have to put yourself in that type of mindset, get all the context in there, and then give this thing a full listen. Like I said, this thing really does paint a picture, give its own setting, so once you really dive into it and get into it, I don't think it'd be too hard for everyone to really get into. But that's just my thoughts on it, bro. I think this album is so slept on. Wanted to get this video out here because this is just like what we want to do. If there's a slept on album below that you think is really slept on, comment that down below. I would love to review some other ones that people think are slept on, because I might agree with you. If I think that album slept on too, I'd love to make a video on it. Even if I praise that album, I would love to make a video on it. But like, comment, subscribe. Again, if you're new here, share with a friend. Y'all know what to do. We appreciate all y'all here already. Peace.